This happened a few months ago. I'm 31 and a local historian. I love uncovering old stories, especially the sad ones. I had heard about a house at the end of Elm Street. It was old and falling apart. People said it was haunted. I thought it might have more to it than just ghosts. The first time I stepped inside, the air felt thick. I smelled mildew mixed with dust. The floorboards creaked under my feet. It felt wrong, but my curiosity won. I had to know what happened there. I walked deeper into the house. The walls were peeling and the windows were broken. I felt a chill run down my spine. After searching rooms filled with old furniture, I found the attic. A dusty door stood slightly open. When I pushed it, the hinges squeaked in protest. Inside, shadows stretched along the walls. Piles of old toys were covered in dust. The stillness felt heavy. I thought I heard soft cries, muffled sounds drifting through the attic. Maybe it was just my imagination. Days passed and I kept going back. Each time felt different. I read old journal entries I found tucked away. They talked about 39 children who had vanished. My heart raced as I read how they were caged. I struggled to believe it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to learn more. One entry mentioned a locked chest hidden up there. I imagined what might be inside. It made my heart pound. The whispers grew louder each visit. Sometimes I heard laughter, but I was alone. I thought it was just kids playing outside, yet something gnawed at me. That chest kept calling me back. I pictured it there, dusty and forgotten. One day I decided to find it. My hands shook as I searched through the attic. Suddenly I heard those cries again. This time they felt closer. Panic surged through me. I turned to leave, but an icy chill swept around me. Then I heard a voice, clear as day. "Help us." I froze, terror tightening my chest. I looked around, but there was no one. I thought maybe I was losing it. I wanted to run, to get out of there, but I felt glued to the spot. Something was wrong in that attic. I stumbled back, desperate to escape, but it felt like the shadows were wrapping around me. I finally dashed out of the attic, down the creaking stairs, and out of the house. My heart raced the whole way. Now I can't stop thinking about it. What happened to those children? Did I really hear them? I don't know if they were ever real or just a figment of my mind. The house calls to me every night. It's like a bad dream I can't shake off. I have to know the truth about that attic, but I'm scared of what I might find. The next morning, I woke up with a determination I couldn't explain. I needed to go back. I drove to Elm Street, my mind racing with questions. Each bump in the old road made my stomach twist. I parked outside the dilapidated house, my heart pounding in my chest. As I stepped inside, a familiar heaviness settled around me. The dust motes floated in the sunlight that crept through the shattered windows. I could hear my own breaths echoing. The air felt electric, charged with something just below the surface. I knew I had to find that chest. I climbed back up to the attic, every step careful. The cries from before whispered at the edges of my mind as I pushed open the door. The moment I stepped over the threshold, the atmosphere shifted. It felt like the shadows were aware of me, watching. I searched through the piles of forgotten toys again. Each one triggered a flash of a lost childhood, a hint of innocence mixed with dread. I couldn't shake the feeling that the laughter I heard wasn't of this world. It filled the silence, pulling me toward the darkest corners of the space. Then I saw it, a dim outline at the far end of the attic, partly hidden beneath a worn blanket. My pulse quickened. I rushed over, fingers trembling as I pulled the fabric away. What lay beneath took my breath away. It was the chest, just as the journal had described. It was old and covered in dust, but the lock shone, and I could see there was a pattern engraved on it. I reached for it, but hesitation stopped me.
My instinct screamed to turn back, but curiosity pushed me forward. Suddenly, a low voice filled the air, swirling like a gust of wind. "Don't open it." My blood ran cold. I spun around, and the attic door slammed shut behind me. Panic gripped me. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice shaky. Silence responded. I turned back to the chest, my heart racing, caught between fear and need for answers. I dropped to my knees, examining the lock. Then, everything went dark. The one window that let in light was blocked from view, casting me into shadow. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking. I turned it on, the screen cutting through the darkness. That's when I saw something behind the chest, a small figure, almost see-through, standing silently. My breath caught in my throat. It looked like a child, eyes wide and lost. It pointed at the chest, then at me, mouth moving but soundless. I felt tears prick my eyes. Who were they? I needed to know. "Please," I said, "tell me what happened." The child opened their mouth wider, but still no sound came out. Just then, a loud bang echoed from the attic door. Fear shot through me. I had to make a choice. Was I ready to open the locked chest, or would the secrets of the past stay buried forever? As the door rattled, I knew I was running out of time. With my heart racing, I grabbed the phone tightly. The glow illuminated the small figure further. The child looked ghostly pale, their expression a mixture of desperation and fear. I felt a sudden urge to reach out for them, but I hesitated. The banging at the door grew louder, shaking the walls around me. My anxiety surged. "Stay back!" I yelled, unsure of what was beyond that door. I couldn't risk a child's safety, even if they were not of this world. But the figure didn't retreat. Instead, they pointed again at the chest, their mouth moving faster now, as if trying to get through to me. I had to know what was in there. An instinct pulled at me, a mix of dread and undeniable curiosity. I glanced back at the door. The persistent banging had turned into a rhythmic thumping. Whatever was on the other side wanted in. "Okay," I whispered to myself, "I can do this." I crawled toward the chest, forcing my body to move despite the fear pulsing in my veins. I took a deep breath and studied the lock. My fingers brushed over the intricate pattern. My mind suddenly flooded with the journal's words. It mentioned a key hidden nearby. I looked around, searching the piles of debris scattered throughout the attic. I needed that key. I had no idea what I would find in that chest, but I already knew it was tied to the sad spirit before me. The child's empty eyes seemed to plead for my action. I searched quickly, glancing back at the door as the thumping continued. My heart felt like it might burst from anxiety. In a split-second decision, I threw aside a dust-covered box filled with broken toys. When it clattered to the ground, something shiny caught my eye. I scrambled to it, fingers trembling as I brushed off the dust. There it was, a small, ornate key. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized the familiar design that matched the lock on the chest. The thumping at the door grew louder. I didn't have time to waste. I shoved the key into my pocket and hurried back to the chest. Sweat dripped down my forehead as I inserted it into the lock. My hands shook. Everything felt surreal. With one swift motion, I turned the key. A soft click sounded, and I felt the tension in the air shift. I hesitated. What if this was a terrible mistake? What if I unleashed something I couldn't control? The banging at the door transformed into a shriek. I jumped back, eyes wide. It was no longer just a sound. It was a voice, a desperate cry that filled the space with pure terror. The child's expression shifted from fear to urgency, and they started to mimic the act of opening the chest, clasping their hands together in front of them, wide eyes begging me to understand. 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, and you'll see, echoed through my mind like an almost forgotten memory. I could almost hear the further echoes of laughter, now twisted into something more sinister. Okay, I'll open it, I whispered, breathless, and with that promise I threw the chest open. The darkness within seemed to swallow light, and for a moment I thought I saw moving shapes. But clarity was hard to find. Suddenly, the attic door burst open, and light flooded the room. I turned to see who or what had come through. The child's expression turned to one of horror. "No," they mouthed silently as the shadowed figure filled the doorway. My heart dropped. What had I just unleashed? Panic surged through me. The shadowed figure slunk forward, stretching the thin line of light, casting it against the walls. It was tall, impossibly elongated, and I felt as if the air itself could freeze in its presence. The child stood rigid beside me, their eyes wide and terrified, like a deer caught in headlights. My instinct screamed at me to flee, but I was frozen. I glanced back at the chest, the darkness still swirling within. Whatever was in there felt like it was somehow connected to this thing. "Run!" the child finally mouthed again, their little hands shaking as they pointed backward. A chill ran down my spine, but I couldn't move. My eyes were glued to the dark figure that was now less than a few feet away. It wore no distinct features, just an endless sea of shadow. A whisper drifted from it, chilling the very marrow of my bones. "Let them out," it hissed, voice dripping with malice. "Let them out, and all will be revealed." "Who?" I managed to ask, my voice a tremble. "Who do you want?" But the answer didn't come. Instead, more shadowy figures began to emerge from behind the main one, small and frail. They moved like smoke, swirling and weaving, creating a nightmarish tapestry of whimpers and wails. I recognized their faces from the faded photographs I had seen earlier in the journal. Children. Their eyes reflected the same despair as the child beside me. "What did you do?" the child in the attic whispered, breaking my frozen state. "Please, we have to go." In that moment, clarity hit me. I couldn't just stand here. I was being drawn into a deeper nightmare. I realized that whatever was happening was not merely about releasing something from the chest, but about confronting this darkness that wanted to drag me in. With sudden resolve, I grabbed the child's hand. "Okay, let's get out of here." But as we turned to escape, the shadowed figure lunged. It was impossibly fast, blocking the staircase. My heart raced again, and that fear mixed with adrenaline propelled me forward. I placed my body between the child and the oncoming darkness. "Stay behind me," I shouted. But the child didn't need telling. They clutched my hand tighter. As we darted toward the only other exit, a small window above.
The chest. I noticed something reflecting in the now swirling shadows, a tiny glimmer of light. The chest. The chest was still open, and something glowed warmly inside. "Wait!" I called out, but it was too late. The child had already started climbing toward the window. "Get the light!" they yelled back. The words echoed in my mind. I had to make a choice, to abandon caution or risk the unknown. With one last look at the writhing shadows beginning to close in on me, I dove for the chest. My trembling fingers reached inside, and just as they brushed against the glowing object, everything went dark. Then, everything went quiet. What had I just unleashed? I blinked, and suddenly I was sitting on the floor of the attic, chest still open beside me. The shadows were gone. The figures that had filled the space with dread had melted away into the walls. But I was not free of their influence. The silence shrouded me like a heavy blanket, and I felt cold sweat trickle down my back. I reached for the glow. My fingers curled around a small orb, warm and pulsing softly, as if it were alive. I brought it closer, squinting in the dim light. It shimmered like a piece of the sun captured in my grasp. But as I studied it, the memory of the shadows, the figures of the children returned. An overwhelming sense of urgency took over. I had to know what it meant. "Where are they?" I whispered to no one. The attic felt abandoned, but I could still sense energy lingering in the air. I glanced at the small window where the child had gone through. There was no sign of them. Had they escaped? As I stepped cautiously toward the window, the floor creaked beneath me. I hesitated, debating whether to search for the child or investigate this glowing object. The orb felt like a lifeline in this suffocating place. But just as I turned back to the chest, the air shifted. A new movement stirred in the corner of the attic. My heart raced as I watched a shadow form, darker than before, coiling in upon itself like a living thing. It pulsated slightly as it took shape, a reminder of the figures I had just seen. This was something different. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. No answer came, but the shape surged forward, closer to the glow in my hands. Panic flickered inside me, igniting my instincts to flee. I started to back away, but my foot snagged on a loose floorboard, sending me sprawling onto the cold floor. The orb rolled from my hands, landing inches from the dark mass. I scrambled to retrieve it, but the shadowy creature lunged, flickering ominously. I snatched the orb just in time, feeling its heat grow, almost as if it were trying to ward off the darkness. "Leave me alone!" I shouted. To my surprise, the shadow hesitated, recoiling as if it had been burned. The warm glow of the orb seemed to push the darkness back. I faced the shadows, feeling a surge of confidence well up with the light in my hand. "What do you want?" I demanded. The aura around the orb pulsed, growing brighter. It illuminated the farthest corners of the attic, and suddenly images flared to life. Visions of children laughing, playing in the sunlight, and then a dark cage enclosing them, their cheeks wet with tears. The shadows writhed angrily. They didn't like my light. "What did you do to them?" I pressed. But the shapes dissolved back into the corners, retreating from the overflow of warmth. Then it hit me. The orb might be the key to understanding what had happened here. I just needed to figure out how to control it. Gathering my courage, I stepped forward again, trying to focus on the warmth radiating from the orb. But even as I pondered my next move, I sensed a presence stirring behind me, something more sinister. And that's when I heard the whisper, soft but unmistakable. "Let them out." My breath caught in my throat. I turned, heart pounding, praying that I was wrong. But staring back at me from the shadows were countless eyes, glinting with desperation. What had I really unleashed? I could hardly breathe. The eyes in the shadows watched me intensely, pleading, and in their depths I felt a chill crawl down my spine. They didn't want harm. They craved freedom. My grip tightened around the orb instinctively, and for a moment I felt its warmth seep into my skin, steadying my racing heart. "Who are you?" I whispered again, but the only response was a dull echo within the attic. Suddenly, one of the shadows pushed forward, its form shifting like smoke. I instinctively raised the orb. The light expanded, illuminating more of the room, and I could see more figures coalescing in the corners, each one bearing an expression of sorrow that echoed their silent cries. "Help us," they seemed to say, though their lips never moved. With newfound determination, I focused on the orb, willing it to connect with the shadows. "If I can't help you, then who will?" I demanded, feeling the weight of their desperation wash over me. "What do I need to do?" The orb pulsed in reply, drawing me closer to the window. It felt as if it were guiding me to a specific spot, awakening something deep within the attic. My heart raced. What if the children were trapped outside? Was there a way to free them? I stepped closer to the window, the cold air brushing against my skin. The child's laughter echoed in my memory, the sound both comforting and haunting. It only deepened the urgency swelling within me.
I could still picture the light that danced around them as they faced their fears. If I was going to free anyone, I had to understand what bound them in the first place.
I turned back to the shadows, my voice steadier now. What holds you here? As soon as I spoke, the shadows shimmered, seeming almost to vibrate in unison. Then, in a whirlwind, the air grew heavy, and the temperature dropped, frost creeping across the window pane. I felt it, the suffocating grip of whatever had enshrouded the attic. Before I could react, the orb flared brightly, illuminating a large trunk in the corner that I hadn't noticed before. It exuded a dark aura, the very essence of despair. It felt like a prison. "That's it, isn't it?" I said, inching closer to the trunk. "You're trapped in there." The shadows flared again, as if urging me to open it, but an involuntary shiver ran through me. What if this was a mistake? I hesitated, fear creeping back in. Then, as if sensing my doubt, the whispers grew louder, tumbling over one another in a frantic urgency. "Let us out! Free us!" Clenching my fists around the orb, I took a deep breath and said, "All right, I'll do it." I stepped forward and released my grip on the orb momentarily, hovering my hand above the trunk's latch. Just as I reached to pull it open, the attic shook violently. Dust and debris rained down from above, and I lost my balance. Then everything went dark. The orb flickered in my hand, casting erratic shadows. As I fell to the floor, the trunk's latch still closed. I couldn't see anything, but I felt the shadows closing in around me, a whirlwind of emotion spiraling with rage and sorrow. "Please," I cried out, my voice swallowed by the impending void. As my heart raced and darkness pressed closer, I didn't realize I had awakened something far worse than mere shadows. Someone, or something, was watching from the depths of the room, waiting for me to make my move. And with the trunk so near, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Everything spun around me in a dizzying blur. I clutched the orb tighter, but its glow flickered weakly, as if unsure of its own power. The shadows whispered louder, intertwining with my racing thoughts. "Help us!" echoed over and over, layering into a chorus filled with anguish. I forced myself to breathe, clutching the orb to my chest, searching for a sign among the chaos. But instead of guidance, a creeping dread settled in. What if I couldn't handle whatever lay within that trunk? What if it unleashed something beyond my understanding? Just then, a shrill cry pierced through the darkness, freezing me in place. "No! Don't let it out!" The voice was distant yet clear, and for a moment I felt a flicker of recognition. I strained to hear more, but silence swallowed the sound, leaving only the shadows pressing closer. "What was that?" I whispered, my voice trembling in the dark. With the shadows still surrounding me, I made my way cautiously toward the trunk. I needed to know what was inside, but an instinct screamed for me to turn back. What if I released something that couldn't or shouldn't be contained? Steeling myself, I knelt in front of the trunk. My fingers brushed against its surface, feeling the cold, rough wood beneath. The whispers surged again, this time frantic, as if the shadows were urging me to make a choice. I could sense a powerful energy thrumming from within the trunk, a dark invitation that clawed at my resolve. In that moment, clarity struck. "What are you?" I breathed, hoping for an answer imparted through the orb. Suddenly, a gust of frigid wind cut through the attic, and the faint outline of a figure appeared above the trunk. I jumped back, heart racing as the shape solidified before my eyes. It was a young girl, ghostly and translucent, her expression a mask of fear and longing. "Help them," she whispered urgently, locking eyes with me. "You have to let them out. They're in pain." My heart sank. More children? My mind raced as I recalled the whispered voices begging for liberation. I could feel the weight of their suffering, as if it were my own. But if I open this trunk?
"Don't think, just do it," she insisted, her eyes widening. In that moment, her desperation overrode my fear. I reached up again to the latch, heart pounding and adrenaline surging. As my fingers grazed the cold metal, I felt an electric charge coursing from the orb, igniting a surge of courage within me. But right as I prepared to lift the latch, a cold, sinister laugh echoed throughout the attic. It was deep and mocking, resonating through the shadows, paralyzing me. "You think you can save them?" the voice taunted, dripping with malice. "You have no idea what you're unleashing." The shadows twisted violently, and the girl's visage flickered, the urgency in her eyes replaced with panic. "No, don't listen to it. You must." But her voice faded as the darkness engulfed me completely, and I was left trembling in the oppressive quiet, the shadows pressing against me like fetters. The trunk loomed close, taunting me with its secrets. Every instinct screamed to flee, but I fought against it. With a burst of resolve, I steadied my breath and gripped the latch. I have to know. And with one powerful pull, I threw the trunk open, ready for whatever might spill out. The contents of the trunk erupted outward in a burst of color and light, scattering into the darkness. I stumbled back, my heart racing. What I saw sent a chill down my spine. Wisps of ethereal light, shimmering and swirling like forgotten memories, began to form shapes, faces, children. They hovered just above the open trunk, eyes wide with confusion and pain. Each looked just as helpless as the ghostly girl who had urged me to release them. Their expressions broke my heart. I had expected some dark horror, not this.
They weren't monsters. They were lost. "Help us," they chorused, their voices barely above a whisper, merging into a soft lament that chilled the air. I froze, grappling with the weight of their pleading. It felt different now. Their suffering was tangible, almost overwhelming. "What do you need from me?" I croaked, battling the wave of despair threatening to consume me. One child, his form solidifying from the mist, reached out toward me. "We can't find peace. We're trapped. You have to help us leave this place." As his words sank in, I felt the orb pulse against my chest, warming against my skin. The glow had steadied, casting light on the scene around me. I thought of the girl's urgency, the danger of the shadows, and the mocking voice that had laughed. "But how?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Destroy the shadows!" another child cried, frustration etched in her face. "They won't let us go." A knot tightened in my stomach. The shadows I had felt, that cold presence, it was here, waiting to strike. Their ominous weight bore down on me. My instincts screamed for flight, to retreat and forget all of this. Yet the children's eyes held me captive. They were counting on me. I glanced at the trunk, filled with fading remnants of their essence. What do I do? As the memories of their joy erupted into the open air, creating a whirlwind of color, darkness began to crawl toward us. The shadows shifted, twisting like a living thing, inching closer as if feeding on my fear. "You have to trust the orb. Let it guide you," the girl urged, her translucent fingers pointing to the darkness. My hands trembled as I raised the orb again. I squeezed my eyes shut, picturing light bursting forth, pushing back the oppressing shadows. I thought of the children, their pain, their hope. "I can do this!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the fear. Suddenly, a blinding light blasted from the orb, filling the attic and illuminating the children. The shadows recoiled, shrieking in rage. I felt a surge of power spiraling through me, steadying my resolve. The children began to shift, moving closer to the light. "Fight them!" the girl shouted. "You have the power!" Just as I felt we were gaining ground, an ear-splitting roar erupted, shattering the moment.
The darkness lunged forward anew, and the shadows twisted violently, swarming toward me with a desperate hunger. I had to act fast. But before I could react, I sensed movement behind me. I turned just in time to see the attic door swing open. Someone was coming inside. My pulse quickened. Could it be help, or something worse? "What now?" I gasped, glancing back to the light and the children. The shadows lunged again. My choices were growing desperate. I barely had a moment to process when the door flew open and a figure stepped into the attic. The dim light spilled over them, casting a long shadow that
loomed as they entered. My heart raced. It was an older man, his hair disheveled and his clothes worn, but there was something familiar about him. I strained to see his face amid the chaos. "What's happening?" he asked, confusion knitting his brows. I didn't have time to explain. The darkness surged again, pressing forward like a tidal wave. "Get back!" I shouted, instinctively raising the orb higher. The light pulsed fiercely, pushing the shadows back, but they were relentless. "Who are you?" I demanded, desperate for answers but too scared to take my eyes off the approaching dark. The children hovered close, their faces painted with fear as the shadows hissed hungrily. "I'm here to help," he said, raising his hands as if to calm me. "I know what's going on." Before I could respond, the darkness lunged again, a solid wall ready to engulf us. I felt the orb vibrating in my palm, a frantic heartbeat matching my own. "You have to focus," the man shouted. "Use the orb to channel your energy against them." "Channel my energy?" I repeated, my mind racing. I didn't know what he meant, but I could feel the fear coiling tighter in my gut. The shadows were closer now, the children crying out for me to act. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. I thought of the joy and laughter that I'd seen in the swirling memories. The shadows, however, had no place in that brightness. I visualized every ounce of hope I could muster, from the children's tiny faces pleading for release to my own desperate resolve. With a burst of determination, I thrust the orb forward. "Leave them alone!" I shouted. Bright light erupted once more, illuminating the entire room in a prismatic glow. The shadows screeched, recoiling as they fought against the stream of light. I felt the warmth of the orb travel through my body, sending pricks of electricity into my fingertips. But just as I thought we were making progress, I noticed something horrifying. With every pulse of light, a dark figure began to form deeper in the corner of the attic. It was just outline at first, but it grew with every flicker of my energy. The man looked worried, his eyes wide. "Don't let it take form." "Then what do I do?" I screamed, panicking. "Keep focusing. You're stronger than it," he urged. But the weight of the shadows was closing in, the temperature dropping around me. Suddenly the children cried out in unison, "Help us! Help us!" Their small voices layered into a deafening chant, echoing in my mind. That's when I saw it. The dark figure was almost complete, and behind it, shadows danced like a storm, ready to strike. I felt the orb grow hotter in my palm, as if it were asking me to do something more. But the fear of failing clawed at my chest. "Please, I can't." "Trust yourself," the man said softly, his eyes locked onto mine. "You have the power." I took a breath. This was it. I would either save them or be consumed. But when I opened my eyes, it was worse than I feared. The form of the dark entity solidified, and I realized, with a sickening twist, that I recognized it. It was my own shadow, creeping closer, waiting for the moment to seize me. "No!" I shouted, and everything went black. I gasped as the shadows pulled me into a suffocating darkness. It was thick, smothering, and filled with an echo of despair. I struggled against it, desperately clawing my way back to the light. The orb pulsed weaker and weaker in my grasp, barely fighting against this malignant force. But then I heard it again, those small voices pleading,
help us." With renewed desperation, I found my voice. "I won't let you down!" I shouted into the void, clutching the orb tightly. Somehow, I could still feel the warmth radiating from it. Drawing from that warmth, I fought to remember the laughter, the joy, the innocence of those children. The brilliance of the orb surged in my palm, igniting a flicker of hope that broke through the oppressive darkness. "Now!" I cried, focusing every ounce of will I had. "Let them go!" Suddenly, the shadows surged forward, rushing at me as if they were a swirling black tide. But I wouldn't let fear control me any longer. I thrust the orb forward again, willing it to expand, to dispel the darkness once and for all. Its glow intensified, and a brilliant, blinding light erupted from it. "Now!" I cried, focusing every ounce of will I had. "Let them go!" Suddenly, the shadows surged forward, rushing at me as if they were a swirling black tide. But I wouldn't let fear control me any longer. I thrust the orb forward again, willing it to expand, to dispel the darkness once and for all. Its glow intensified, and a brilliant, blinding light erupted from it. The shadows screamed in unison, recoiling violently. I could feel the pressure around me loosening bit by bit, the ominous chill fading as laughter replaced the whispers of despair. I closed my eyes, letting the light pull me upward. In that moment of clarity, I felt their pain wash over me, like shards piercing my heart. But through the pain came a sense of release. They needed this. They needed to be free. As the shadows condensed into one final desperate scream, the orb exploded into a camera flash of dazzling light. I felt myself being propelled backward into brightness, and when I opened my eyes again, the attic was filled with warmth. The children stood in a circle around me, their ghostly forms beginning to glow brighter until they were shimmering specters of joy. "Thank you!" they chorused, drifting higher above the floor, their faces unburdened by sorrow. My heart soared, but it was quickly followed by a pang of panic as I noticed the darkness retreat to its corner, still snaking and writhing, hungry and intent. The man stood beside me, his expression one of measured concern. "You should get out of here. The entity won't rest until it retakes what you just freed." I nodded, already feeling the urgency pulse through my veins. "I can't just leave them." "They are free now," he said, glancing at the children as they began to dissolve into, "You've saved them. But if you stay in this place, you risk being taken." A flicker of uncertainty gripped me, but then I saw the children smile at me, their faces growing fainter. Their gratitude shone like stars against the backdrop of fading shadows. But was it really over? I still didn't know what that dark thing was, what it wanted. "Go," the man urged, and the shadows began to swell again, reaching out toward me, eager for the nutrients of fear. I darted toward the staircase, the orb's warmth still clutched tightly in my palm, offering me a sliver of hope. I raced down the stairs as the darkness writhed behind me, its whispers growing louder, hissing words that slid under my skin. "You can't escape. You don't know what you've awakened." Bursting through the front door, I stumbled outside, gasping for breath beneath the starkness of daylight. The weight on my chest eased slightly, and the house loomed behind me, a twisted husk wrapped in mystery. Would it ever truly be free of the shadows? Looking back, I could barely see the figures of the children flicker within the attic window one last time. But the uncertainty of their fate haunted me. What had truly happened in that house, and how deep were the roots of the darkness that lingered? I stepped back, away from the house, squeezing the orb in my palm. "What was that?" I whispered, looking toward the road. Were the children now truly safe, or did they linger in some in-between? Then again, how much of it was merely a reflection of my psyche, a manifestation of my fears brought to life. I turned, glancing over my shoulder again. The house stood still, its secrets buried deep within its decaying walls. I'd come seeking answers, but in the end, the darkness had revealed as much to me as it had concealed. And as I walked away, the lingering question still hovered. Had I truly saved them, or was this merely a temporary reprieve from something waiting for another chance? The house at the end of Elm Street would always remain, veiled in shadow and sunlight, an eternal enigma.